Okay, we're back now, and this is episode 8. And we're going through the line-by-line marbling. Think of marbled beef. The marbling of Luke's explanation, the interweaving with Matthew's. And this is going to be kind of complicated because there's so much to explain because there's so many debates. On the left-hand side, you see Matthew 2, summary statement. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Afterwards, and Matthew's target, and Matthew's theme in Matthew 2, is the Magi arriving ostentatiously, causing trouble in Jerusalem. And Matthew always has one particular prophecy that he funnels his text toward, all right, per section. And as you can see on the left-hand side in verse 6, Matthew 2:6, all in caps, it's about Bethlehem being the birthplace. Yet he doesn't give you any details. Why? Because the audience already knows. Matthew's moving on from, hi, this is what happened, as if, you didn't know anything. He's commenting. He's using real Bible truth. He's really under the Spirit, but he's targeting certain topics. And Luke is going to interweave with Matthew's purpose to interweave his own purpose, which, as we've seen, from synopsis number 2 forward, Luke's theme is reversal. Because that's what the church age inaugurates. Luke is definitely writing after Christ's death. He's definitely writing, as a close associate with Paul. And Paul's whole ministry is about the reversal. The reversal from the bride offer to the Jews, because the Jews turned Christ down. Now that bride offer is going to the Gentiles. The Jews still inherit all the old covenants, because those were all unconditional to Abraham and David. Okay? The land grants and the millennium and the rulership forever, all of that is unconditional, whether Israel's a good girl or a bad girl. But to be bride of Christ, ruling beside Christ in the millennium, that required her to develop spiritually, corporately into a bride. She didn't. Some of her members did, and they go on to live post-cross, post-rejection, and are part of church. One of whom is Paul, the sort of herald about the change to church. And Luke is his close associate. So Luke's theme has to be reversal, because he's going to show what changed. It's the same story, the same points, but he's showing reversal. And that's why, when Matthew has the angel visiting Joseph, Luke is going to show the angel visiting the guy that came before, namely Zacharias. But he's also going to have the angel visiting Mary, whereas Matthew doesn't talk about the angel visiting Mary. Because Matthew's talking about very Jewish legal protocol stuff, and it's always the male that gets the attention. Okay? So when Luke talks back to the summary statement that Matthew makes about Bethlehem, because he's making short shrift of the whole virgin pregnancy thing, he's making an issue of the fact that it was predicted. See, because he's countering the political brouhaha. The political brouhaha is, how do we know you're even a legitimate son of David? Well, hello, he's born in Bethlehem. That was predicted. He was, his first, as it were, salvo, anticipatory shot, was the virgin pregnancy prophecy in Isaiah 9. This is his second shot across the bow. Okay? But Bethlehem being the location of where he's going to be born. But he's not spending any time on the details of that event. Instead, he's spending time on the fact that we got a third witness, okay, that this is a valid thing and not illegitimate, which are coming from the east into where? Jerusalem, which everybody reading Matthew knows at that time, given the Mosaic law, means that Mary and Joseph are actually physically right there, under the Magi's nose. But the Magi don't know where he is, because they can't see the star. They can't see the angel. Why? Because the angel is protecting the couple. So Herod doesn't know anything about it. They can't see any star. So he's got to gather the priests, and it's Bethlehem. So instead of the angel standing over Bethlehem, it's in Jerusalem, because that's where the couple is, the baby having been what? Already born in Bethlehem. Now, 8 days after his birth, he's got to be presented at temple, which is where? In Jerusalem. So this is really very funny. How would you could make a really great movie out of this. Here they are, all this tumult, looking for Messiah, Herod looking to kill him, the Magi's looking to worship him, and he's right there in Jerusalem. In 8 days, he's got to present himself. Let me tell you something. If these people who quote, obviously Herod doesn't know anything about Judaism, even though he claims he's a Jew. He's observant, but he doesn't study. And the people who are answering him also don't study, because they say Bethlehem, but they should know that the couple is right there at temple right now as they talk. 8 days, he's got to be presented at temple for circumcision. If they knew this much, how come they don't know the timeline? The timeline is given in Daniel and Isaiah to the day. Haggai 2 actually makes it to the day. Daniel and Isaiah to the year. The day is Hanukkah. This Hanukkah. The Hanukkah that they're all at right now. It's just about to end. He was born on the first day of Hanukkah, just as God told Zerubbabel he would cause to happen, because his signet ring is there, meaning he's seed of Christ. And from this day forward, a very clever wording. Okay. Yeah, this day, the dedication day, the 357 years after Zerubbabel got the promise, will become Hanukkah, Feast of Lights, dedication, Nazareth. It's very, very funny. Okay? The RCC, the Roman Catholic Church, got it right when they said Christmas was December 25, except that our December 25 isn't December 25 anymore, because Pope Gregory chopped 10 days off our calendar, which just happens to make it closer to Hanukkah, which is the real day that Christ was born. Now, they should have said that it was Hanukkah, but you got to understand, the RCC got formed under Constantine. They were virulently anti-Semitic at that time, and always have been ever since. So they had to change the name, just like they changed Passover to Easter. I mean, it didn't, the anti-Semitism is political. It's not personal. It's political. There was this big battle as to who knew the Bible better, the Jews or the Christians. And, became the Hatfields and McCoys in the first couple centuries. And the Catholics just, ended up being the top guy in the political totem pole, with all the factions fighting each other for 200 years prior. I go through that in my 11 GGS videos. I go through that blow by blow, the development of the Catholic Church. So I'm not going to go through it here. The point is that get the story. Again, we're treating this like a story, because that's how they're doing. They're following drama rules. We got our plot here. Second scene, this is scene 2 in the story. First scene was the birth itself, very summary, tableau. Second scene, brouhaha. Think of New York City or some other very big metropolis, people walking all over the place. It's holiday time, and think of it like Christmas, because it's the Feast of Lights. There's lots of candles to celebrate the independence. This is Israel's Independence Day, or second Independence Day. First one is the Exodus. Second one is when she was able to rededicate the temple after getting rid of Antiochus IV Epiphanes. This is the second biggest holiday, secular holiday in the year. And technically, the Exodus is considered a spiritual holiday. You're not allowed to work. But it was Independence Day for Israel. That was when she got to leave Egypt. And this is right up there with it. And it's coming at the end of the Roman year. That's why there is, as we're going to see on the right-hand side, a census. The Romans did their census at the end of the year. They had to do it at the end of the year because they did it as a head count. and I'll have to cover that in more detail. Augustus basically reformed the whole tax scheme in about, let's see, he came to power, what was it, 33 or so, I forget, 33, 34, 27, 34 BC. Something like 33, 34, somewhere in that area. I have to go look it up. And by about 25 BC, he had finally convinced the Senate that they needed to reform their estate taxes, their income taxes. That's what made him great, is he did a huge reformation of the bureaucracy, tax collection, a whole bunch of other stuff. That's one reason Herod is in power. Herod is collecting taxes for Rome. Roman soldiers are not there collecting taxes. Herod's doing it. That's why you don't find any Roman records of the taxes, because it's all Jewish records. And that was to make nice with Jews, and it also saved Augustus money because Herod's doing it. Why? Because that's already the style of taxation that's Jewish. It's a head tax in Judaism. Temple tax was a head tax. Well, our dear boy Augustus had changed the system of taxation for the provinces to a head tax, and did that circa 12 BC or so. It took a while to get into the provinces, but don't go looking for Roman presence collecting the taxes like all those stupid movies do. There wasn't any. It was Jewish. It was under Herod, and some years Herod paid the taxes deliberately and directly and rebated them to the Jews. He was trying to curry favor. So you're not going to find a Roman presence for the taxation to Rome. Herod is there to ensure that the taxes get paid. And he's got his own system that manages to collect the right amount of tax under the Augustan system. So all of our Bible movies, showing Romans sitting there doing the census is a bunch of baloney. It was Jews. It won't be on the Roman tax rolls. It'll be on the Jewish tax rolls. And since it was done every year, they washed their papyrus every year after they collected their tax, or maybe every 6 years. Who knows how long they kept their papers. Okay? And then they wrote over them again, because the papyrus and parchment was time-consuming and expensive to make. So they saved it and they reused it, just like you would reuse paper. All right? So the focus is Bethlehem. The focus is the timeline. What Matthew is stressing here is high. You know what city it is. How come you don't know what time it is? It's Chanukah in the very year that was predicted ever since Moses in Psalm 90 that Messiah would come. Now you could argue about the interpretation at Moses' point. You couldn't argue it after Isaiah 53, because David had died. 1 Kings 6:1, 1,000 years after that was the deadline of time. And I go through that in my Psalm 90 videos. Okay, it's eminently provable by text, by concept, all kinds of different ways, and there are a lot of videos and stuff to go through. I wrote web pages on it, and they're indexed in the video descriptions. Okay, so what Matthew is telling you here is high. He's born in Bethlehem, but, hello, Herod didn't know that. So much for him being a good Jew. And the Jews, who were supposed to be the good Jews, see, he's going to the chief priests and scribes. He's not going to the common guy. He's going to the head of the Sanhedrin. And this is all they know? Why didn't they run back to Herod? Why didn't they run back to Herod and say, Herod, they've got to be in Jerusalem right now. The timeline ever since Psalm 90. But they don't know their own timeline anymore. And we know that from Josephus. All of his chronology in his book, The Antiquities and the Wars of the Jews, that's all screwed up. In some cases, it's off by 300 years. In some cases, it's off by less. It's just, none of the numbers balance to each other. And none of them balance to the Bible. Not a one. Well, so where did he get it from? Where did he get his training? He was of the same generation as these people. They're real big on olive bulks. The Mishnah is a recording of what they were thinking at that time. All their so-called sage wisdom is in the Mishnah. Yeah, well, they forgot how to tell time. But they remember Bethlehem, yeah. House of bread, place of David's birth, yeah, it's kind of hard to forget. And this is Israel's second birthday, when she got rid of the Greeks. House of Lights, the light parade that went into the temple and rededicated it after all those pig sacrifices had defiled it. Haggai 2 records what date that was. But do you see anybody remembering Haggai 2? What? This is very, very wry, W-R-Y, that Matthew is doing. This is the prophecy he mentions. Why isn't he mentioning Haggai 2? Because he's recording what they say, not what he knows. They don't know it's Haggai 2. They're that dumb. They don't know what time it is. They don't remember Haggai 2. See, he's inquiring where Messiah is to be born. But the first question is when, because if it's not the right time, it doesn't matter where. And instead of Herod going to the chief priests and scribes asking when, he goes to the Magi and asks when, which immediately, again, stresses the fact that there was no star. If he could look up in the sky and see a star, he could talk to his next door advisor or these guys, because these guys were in charge of charting the skies, because they had to do that to know the new moon feasts. How come these guys didn't see a star? Why is he going to the Magi to find out when the star appeared? Because he can't see one, and neither can these guys. Because these guys run in, the Magi run in and say, we saw his star. Oh yeah? These are the people in charge of charting the new moons and the stars, so they know what time it is. But they don't know what time it is. They tell him where, but the first thing they should have done is tell him when. But they don't. And where does Herod go to find out when? To the Magi who saw the star that nobody else can see. You see how pithy and wry this is? This is a finessed style. Matthew is leaving out Haggai 2. He's the people who are supposed to know when are telling, Herod's going to the wrong people. He's going to the chief priests and scribes to know where. But their chief job is to manage the calendar so that they get their holidays right according to the law. He should have gone to them to say the question he's asking the Magi. He should have gone to them and say, what's this about a star? Is there a prophecy about a star? And if so, when? But they're not. They're not talking about when. They're talking about where. Now, granted, that's the question the Magi asked. But Herod is immediately concerned about getting a hold of the king. Where is not going to be as important as when. Because, hello, well, maybe he was born in whatever city it was, but how long ago? Because if it's too long ago, then Herod can't catch him. But instead, he secretly, he doesn't get that information from the right people. These are the people in charge of the calendar. He's not getting it from them. He's going to the Magi, and he's going there secretly, because the Magi are in charge of astrology, and Deuteronomy 18 prescribes the death penalty if you're asking about astrology. And he can't ask when without it being an astrological question. Not to these guys. He dare not ask that kind of question to these guys. But he can ask when prophecy, because all Israel's prophecy is timed. Okay, and I go through that in the Psalm 90 video so you can see the structure. And again, you can query this even on Google. Just Google on Age of Desolation and Age of Torah, and you'll find it. 2,000 years, Messiah's supposed to be born and die, and history's supposed to begin. That's the actual Bible. But because the Jews can't tell time anymore, they think it's a longer period at this point. And they don't know what year they're in. They actually get their years wrong. So see, by saying where and not saying when, and asking the when question to the wrong people, Matthew very deftly tells you not only is Jerusalem negative and worrying about the politics instead of caring about God and hide this prophecy for, the 2,000 years now is finally about to be fulfilled. Instead of caring about that, they care about the politics. And instead of caring about when and what time it is, the chief guys in charge of that question are doing a little kitchen maid job of saying Bethlehem. And the people who you're not supposed to ask when, because they're astrologers, Herod secretly, of course, in order to avoid the death penalty himself, goes to the Magi and asks when. You see, all this is backwards. That's the point. And that's what Luke is going to tap into with his theme of reversal. It's a reversal for Israel. Israel's role is reversed. She was supposed to be the bride. She ends up being friends of the groom by the time you get to Matthew 22. She ends up being friends of the groom, because the bride's going to end up being church. From Matthew 16 forward, that's the theme. Okay? How Israel's rejecting him, so now he's got to pick a new bride. This is like, the parallel, the reverse parallel between Vashti and Esther. Israel's playing Vashti, so now he's got to go to the highways and byways and find Esther. And that's all being introduced right here. Okay, so now let's look at how Luke plays off that wryness. It's really important. This is something, again, there are rare points where everybody agrees on something. Almost every scholar I've ever read agrees that Luke has a very elegant Greek style, and he loves to finesse. I remember when my pastor was exegeting in the middle 1980s, he liked to stress, maybe it was later, he stressed a lot that Luke uses 24 genitive absolutes, that's like split screen TV, in Acts, in the book of Acts. Sorry about the coughing. So Luke likes to finesse. He likes to, where somebody else would beat you over the head with the point, like I do, he likes to do it sotto voce. Okay? And that's the style that Matthew's already using here. Looks like I'll have to come back in a few minutes. Okay. Allergies are pets. Alright. So when you go to read this, they're putting their tongues firmly in their cheek. There is a sort of half smile on the right, a sort of LOL attitude going on here. They're how do you want to put it? They're treading softly on the facts in a way, not quite as softly as you might think, but it's not Benny Hill. Okay, this isn't slapstick, but there's an element of humor that is floating, okay, because it's so tragic, it's funny. And in order not to be too unkind, but yet not to compromise doctrine either, they tell you the facts in a manner that you realize, like I did while I was just talking about this thing in Matthew. What they say tells you what they were saying wrong to the wrong people. Everything's reversed. I realized that as I was talking. As I was looking at the text, trying to say, okay, well, what does this actually mean? It didn't occur to me before I said it just now. He should be asking this when question to who? The guys in charge of the calendar. I realized that as I was talking. So the reader would have realized it as he was reading, especially since he was so steeped in Jewish culture. You have to know who these people are and what their jobs were. You have to know who these people were and what their jobs were. You have to know the politics. You have to know why is this mentioned but not Haggai 2. You have to know about Haggai 2. You have to know, in other words, a great deal of Old Testament scripture and isagogics to get the humor. You know, any kind of joke requires that you know what's not said in order for it to be funny. And here, it's a tragic comedy. All right, getting ready to be a real tragedy. I mean, it's funny. Gentiles as heralds? That's funny. An entourage, a flashy entourage, when, you know, the audience knows he was born in a feed trough, fatne in Greek. We call it manger, but you know, manger, I'm not saying it right in French, so I don't feel like speaking correctly today. Okay? That means feed trough. To eat. It's the verb in French, to eat. And we call it manger. Alright? And we're going to see the manger story in Luke. But see, he's contrasting what left out, sotto voce. Hi. He's unceremoniously born, wrapped in grave clothes, in a feed trough. So he's not mentioning it. Because that makes the contrast with this, you know, caravan from the east and all their silks and their, you know, fine linens or whatever it is they're wearing that makes them, you know, show off. Coming with their bedding, you know, their tented beds, you know, that are, you know, walked, you know, they sleep, they have those palanquins, all right? All that in contrast to what this was. And he doesn't say that they had the trappings. All he has to use is the fancy arrived verb, okay, barginomai, and just say the names of the two places. I mean, this means house of bread. This has a lot of different meanings, but God brings peace is one of them. See, bread and peace. It's got other meanings too. I don't want to go through all that right now. The point is that the Jews reading this are going to be laughing. Jewish believers especially. Okay? At the contrast, at the irony, at the fact that they're asking where to the people who should have told them when, and he's going to the people who it's illegal to ask when, to ask the question when, and of course that's why he has to do it secretly. See, that's very funny. So, we'll just, get that far. Well, actually, I'm going to probably just get this far. So Luke starts here. And he starts in Greek fashion. Okay? In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus. That's the tax reform that really got started about 25 BC. I have extensive links to contemporaneous Latin and Greek sources in my Ephesians 1 reparse.doc. The PDF version of that file does not have it has the links, but you can't use them because Adobe can't read them. But in the Word doc version of it, there's like 1,000, got to be at least 1,000 links. Because I'm plotting out the whole Roman Empire to Odovaker, because Paul maps it year by year, okay, in Ephesians 1, 3 through 14 meter. So there are links about Augustan tax reform in there. There are links about Quirinius, so I'm not going to spend time on this here. All right? And you can go look up those links if you want. The short and sweet of it is that Luke is presenting, see, here's the ostracized kid, born 6 months before this soon-to-be ostracized kid. And here's the guy who was the head of, the benefactor of Herod. They're real close. They are so close that Caesar Augustus comes to visit Herod every 5 years, and Herod basically elected that Caesar probate Herod's own estate, which is what's going to give rise to the Bethlehem incident, that Caesar probate his own estate, okay, because Herod doesn't like his kids and his kids don't like them, and they're always murdering each other. This is like the Borgias. The story of the Borgias in modern history is very much like Herod's. I'm not sure who's worse, okay? So they're always killing each other in the family. So in order to keep peace, Augustus has made, it's a quasi, like, hi, if you don't want to probate this and you just want to take it all yourself, you can have it. That's the kind of way he left his will. And Augustus was in charge of it. He was the executor, the probate guy, the legate, the whole bit. Okay. This is talking about tax reform that you can read on the internet or through the links in that Ephesians 1 reparsed doc, Latin or Greek or translations, okay, including statements made by Augustus himself about what he did. There's a lot of contemporaneous information on the internet now, thank God. Okay? This is part of his tax reform that first started in Rome and then went to the provinces about 12 years later. This guy was like his best friend. Okay? If Augustus could be said to have a best friend, this guy Quirinius would be it. Governor is not necessarily a political office. It's a rank you had for everything you did in Roman society, every official job. Even if you didn't have the office, you had to have the rank. If you have the rank of governor, okay, and this is overseer, the territory over which his rank applies. If you have this rank, even if you don't have the office, that gives you certain powers, like to collect tax. Because this guy has got syphilis or, I forget, some kind of sexual disease, really bad. Kind of like, who was the guy that was the heir apparent of Diocletian would later have, all right? Aurelius Victor wrote about him. I can't remember the guy's name right now. It begins with an L. Quirinius was such a close friend of Augustus that Quirinius was taking care of Gaius, who was like, the apple of Augustus's eye. I think it was his nephew or something. Quirinius was the guy who was the tutor and overseer, sort of, guiding the young man through his first tour, who was going to Syria, and this was about 1 BC, 2 BC. Okay, there's a lot of debate about what date it was. Okay, and I'm going to refine that date as soon as I figure out more what Paul is doing in Ephesians 1, because he tells us what date it is. I'm just not sure I'm doing the math right. So Quirinius was there. He could have been in Rome and not in Syria with Gaius, but he would have had the rank of governor, and he would have had to have the rank of governor to have the right and the entourage needed, so he's not, how do you want to call it? So nobody's miffed local. See, if he's going to collect the tax, first of all, Herod was a tax collector. The people in general didn't see the Romans as tax collectors. They saw fellow Jews, like Matthew, for example. They didn't see Romans collecting the tax. Herod didn't do it that way. All right? But the guy who's going to collect the tax from Herod has to have sufficient rank so he doesn't ruffle the feathers of the procurator, which at this time was going to be Pilate, starting in 26 AD. Well, Pilate wasn't there yet at this point. Okay? He can't, his rank has to be, I'm sorry, I'm yelling. His rank has to be higher than the people he's going to collect the tax from. He's really getting it from Herod, but it's going from Herod through some troops. They got to go probably put it at the Antonia Fortress, which is right next to the temple. Okay? And the Romans, who are going to hand it over to Quirinius, they're not going to hand it over to somebody of the same or lesser rank. So this is like a plenipotentiary power or a power special in order to collect the tax. That doesn't mean he was political governor of Syria on a tour. And in fact, if he was in Syria at the time that I'm beginning to guess is 1 BC, I still have to work it out, then he was there trying to help Gaius. All right? So it was a quick jump from where he was with Gaius to run over and collect the tax because, by the way, Herod was dying. Everybody knew for gotta be 12 months before Herod died that he was dying. He was so sick, and he was taking every kind of treatment he could, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and he was driven mad by it. It was some kind of sexual disease. But that wasn't all it was, and I'm not sure all of the details. I used to know, but I've forgotten now. But you can look that stuff up. This is common knowledge. What's not common knowledge is that governor, and I documented this in Ephesians 1, read parse doc, just search on Quirinius in that document. Governor is a title that has a rank. It's not necessarily an office. It's like you're in World War I and your commander, gets wounded. Okay, so you're now acting commander until he gets back. Okay, that's a sort of combination of function and office. But let's say that your commander needed to send you to, from the Somme to Trieste for supplies. And in order for the supply sergeant to give them to you, you're going to have the rank of commander to be entitled to sign off. Because the supply sergeant wants to cover his butt in case something bad happens to the supplies. Okay, so then you're made commander solely for the purpose of collecting from the supply sergeant. That's the limit of your scope of your rank. You're not commander with respect to anything else. Common, equivalent today is power of attorney. Power of attorney is a rank that allows you to do something for somebody else, and it is specified as a certain scope and limits. And outside those limits, you don't have power of attorney. That's the way governor is used in the Old Testament. And I believe I listed the verses so that you can check it. It is not simply a political office where you're physically stationed in Syria in some kind of consulate-like office and you've got, 50 servants. It's not like that. That's not the way this term was solely used. So all those people saying, well, Quirinius wasn't governor of Syria until 6 AD. He was a dog's body for Caesar. He was his best friend. He was sent as an emissary everywhere. They've been friends for decades. And, he was even entrusted to take care of Gaius. And, Quirinius had to regard that as, how do you want to call it? If you're in charge of taking care of the emperor's nephew, that isn't exactly a prestigious job. On the surface, it sounds prestigious because you're close to him, but the actual work is pretty demeaning. You're taking care of a kid. You're babysitting. Even if the kid is, 20, 25. I forget how old Gaius was at that point. All right? So let's not be so shallow in our objections to the Bible, nor so shallow in our explanations. So, the first thing we hear is what? This is what? Gentiles. These are what? Gentile officials. They are what? Heralds announcing the arrival of the King of the Jews. Right? And who do they go to? Well, see, because they're officials, they're arriving with a lot of stink. Either they went straight to Herod or Herod sought them out. Okay. Well, here's another friend. Here's another official. Here's another goy, Gentile. Kind of a higher rank than the Magi. And by the way, the Magi come from a country that's the enemy of this guy. You see how Luke is doing point counterpoint? He's being very precise so that you can't doubt that he's matching to Matthew. So if you're a scholar and you think Luke is the third gospel or that Matthew is not the first, especially since it should be pretty well known that Luke came out somewhere between 44 and 60 AD. Unless you're totally stupid. Okay? How come the scholars don't notice all this tracking? I'm just now getting to Matthew 2. And we're tracking word by word. See? Bethlehem here. So what's our topic? Okay? She leaves Nazareth, which is where Matthew ends chapter 2, to go to Bethlehem, which is how Matthew begins chapter 2. See the reversal? This is how Matthew ends the chapter, so that's how Luke begins it. Word by word, keyword matching, in reverse order. That's how Matthew begins the chapter, so that's how Luke ends the sentence. Coming full circle and tying to Matthew. Is this cool or what? We got Gentiles here as a group, officials. Enemy of this guy and his officials. Okay? Befriending, allegedly, is Herod. Okay, so let's pick a Gentile who's the best friend of this guy, who's taking care of the heir apparent to this guy. See? Herod's supposed to be the king. Herod's supposed to inherit. Okay, so this guy is just a friend to the guy who's going to inherit all this. Because at that point, Gaius was up for the promotion. That was like his first, maybe it was his first, but it was one of his early tour of duties. He's very young there. He's getting his feet wet in Syria. He's either on his way there, or he's been there for a while, or he's just on his way back. See, because the tour would usually be a couple of years. Because you don't just, leave for a foreign land overnight when you're heading an army, which is what Gaius was learning to do. All right? Caesar loved him. It was a real blow when he died. Okay? Gentile official. Gentile official guarding who? The heir apparent, who is going to be what? A king. So here are Magi. They're not kings, or maybe they were, but it's not part of the story. To a king, about a king who's not this guy. And then this guy, see, I got to show you the wit and the interplay. This guy, this is better than an HBO movie, okay? This guy is going to end up coming to Jerusalem because this guy is so sick, and everybody's known this for months. At the time this is happening, everybody's expecting Herod to die any day. He was in total agony, screaming all the time, sometimes stabbing himself, sometimes stabbing other people. He killed his own wife, who he loved, who was a Jewish princess. She really was a Jewish princess, Mariamne. But she wasn't from the house of Judah, Jewish princess. She was from the Hasmoneans, the usurpers, who were trying to replace the king of the Jews. See, if you know your history about this time, this is extremely ironic and funny. I'm trying to bring out as much as, comes to my mind as I'm talking, because I haven't rehearsed this. This is just all off the cuff. But you see the paralleling? Okay, there's a king. Okay, so here's a king. Here are Gentiles that we are going to later in history think are kings. Okay, so here's a guy who's going to take over the king. They're talking about kings. And he's going to actually be the king that takes over from this king. Because this king isn't going to be in town at the time. Because this king is dying, trying to kill. This king is dying, trying to kill this king, who's just being born. See all the ironies? So the big problem is, if Herod dies, the tax mechanism of collection is in jeopardy. You get that? If there's one thing Caesar Augustus was good at, it was administration. That was what saved Rome. Rome as a republic was just dog doo-doo. This guy saved Rome. He really did. He was pretty proud of it too. Okay? So, he's going to send his trusty friend to collect the taxes because he's got to preserve this, since this guy is dying for trying to kill this guy. So, we got other Gentiles that are going to be arriving in Jerusalem after these Gentiles leave. Now, all of that, hopefully, you're seeing it right in the text. You wouldn't see it in the text if Luke didn't word it this way, starting out. See? Bethlehem, and at the end of this chapter, Nazareth. Okay, so we'll mention Nazareth first because we're going in reverse order. Okay, he's saying Bethlehem of Judea. He's saying Nazareth. He's going even on the trip is in reverse order. Nazareth to Judea to Bethlehem. They're going from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, and at the end of the chapter they go to Nazareth. Opposite direction. You see how Luke is tracking to that? This is the kind of thing that you did if you were good at writing. This is the kind of thing that would make the writing memorable, that people would comment and compliment and remember and ponder. And I'm not even at what, verse 4? Not even at verse 4 really.
Now if you're sleeping, just in those days there was a decree that we can't find because we're looking in Roman records when it's only going to be in Jewish records because we don't bother to learn Jewish practice. We don't study our history, okay? So are you asleep already? A decree went out from Israel, just taken by Quirinius, which everybody says doesn't exist. Because there was no governor of Syria named Quirinius at the time, because we think governor only means a political office over a given territory. We don't know that this term in Greek is used for rank, and we don't know anything about the Roman system of ranking for specific functions, like power of attorney, same kind of idea. No, stays the decree went out from Caesar Augustus while Quirinius, who everybody debates, was governor of non-existent governor of Syria, because we don't know what this word means and we don't bother to look it up. And everybody went on his way to register for this census, each to his own city. Oh, I've heard that story since I was 2 years old, and I'm bored to tears with it. I've heard it 19,000 times. Yes, Jesus was born in Bethlehem. But of course, most people don't even know what Bethlehem even means. They don't know it means house of bread. Why? Dawid means beloved. Beginning to see that there's a lot more material here, and I haven't even gotten really to verse 4. Not the story we're told in pulpits, huh? Didn't we all memorize this story when we were kids? Yeah. And it's written and it's taught to us in robotic ways, and we don't know what's really there. And then when someone comes and says, well, the Bible is a liar, the Bible is wrong, the Bible is incorrect, the Bible contradicts itself because Quirinius wasn't governor until 6 A.D. Yeah, he was also in charge with a governor rank in 12 B.C. when this went to the provinces for a very short time. It's not a political office. It was a function that demanded a rank. But people don't look back at 12 B.C. They don't look at the reversal. Nazareth to Judea to Bethlehem, reverse trip. And that one's going to end at Nazareth. Of course, they don't even know that Bethlehem is only 5 miles southwest of Jerusalem. Bethlehem's a small town. That's why there's no room at the inn. But he has to go there. So Bethlehem is overwhelmed with people registering for the census, and yes, it's the Feast of Lights, which was introduced by what? We saw a star. What's a star? Oh, it gives light. What are angels called in the Old Testament? The stars of God sang for joy. That's in the book of Job. How come our brains don't turn on? Stars don't act like Mitch Miller bouncing balls. If Herod saw a star, why does he ask him when it happened? Can't he just look up in the sky? Yeah.
So now we get this little bit of wit. You see that they're playing on the keywords. You see he's doing it in reverse order. You see he's matching Goyim, Gentile, to Goyim, And he's playing with rank, because these are men of high rank. Okay? They could have been kings. Doesn't say. To a king about another king who would obviously make this king, who's already dying, pretty upset. If he's got to die, he's going to take everybody with him. Meanwhile, this king is pretty concerned that this king's death is going to turn Jerusalem into a brouhaha, and that's not helped much. See what a soap opera this is? That's not helped much by the arch rival of this king sending a bunch of emissaries. Who knows how? You don't know. Are they planning a political marriage? Because, in the Orient, they do their marriages at birth. You don't actually meet your spouse until later in life, but the marriage is usually contracted at birth or when you're 5 years old or something like that. So is that why they're here? To contract a secret marriage? Is the Persian emperor sending them? Because, see, look, Herod's dying. So what, are they planning ahead a little bit? This king here has a lot of reason to be real concerned about the fact that this very sick king just got a visit from some VIPs from the court of Susa. I don't know if they still had the court at Susa in those days. Inquiring about another king of the Jews. Oh man, honey, I'd send Quirinius there just to find out what the hell was going on. Don't you wish they made a Bible movie that told all these kinds of stories and played with them and did more research on them? Wouldn't that be a much more interesting movie than the Max von Sydow version of The Greatest Story Ever Told, which is such a boring story to watch him play it, and he's a great actor. But they must have made him turn into a robot. Him and Jeffrey Hunter are two of the worst actors, the great actors of themselves, but they were given bad direction or something, that they play really insipid roles of Christ. I'd like to see Bruce Davison do, something, play a more like a Russell Crowe type of role, in a Russell Crowe type of, hard action picture, and tell the story. God knows we got enough information to prove it. Why aren't we telling the story and skip the stupid star thing? Wouldn't this be a great movie? Okay, the Jesus of Nazareth, unfortunately, pretended like the star was real. Because, Zeffirelli can't go against politics. But this would have been such a greater story, considering he got so much else about the politics right, if he could have told it the way it really is. I mean, you're beginning to get that now, right? I'm just going through the translation. The Greek isn't that much different for the most part. It's not until we get to, dialogue about Mary that I'm going to have to worry about translation, because that's all insipid. But you see, this is a big political deal. This guy has to worry about the fact that this guy is dying, and this guy's arch enemy, Persia, just got a visit from an entourage of VIPs from Persia looking for who? Another king of the Jews. To do what? Maybe replace this one? By what means? Maybe a contract marriage? Okay, there is a great deal of revenue coming into Roman coffers that Herod was sending faithfully every year. And now that source of income looks like it might dry up. Not only that, but be invaded? Good thing that Quirinius is probably nearby with Gaius, with a garrison. I'm not sure how many troops were there. I have to look it up. It's still, 15 days march. Because you got your train and your baggage and your, equipment and all that stuff. And Romans could do fast force marches, but the Magi are already there. Who knows how many people are en route and would beat Quirinius to the punch. Of course, they would have had spies out and might have known. But you see, this is a big political deal. I hope you see that. So we got Gentiles, political powder keg right here. That concerns everybody. This is roughly equivalent to the Chinese communists or the arriving in the Russian embassy asking, where's going to be the next president? We want to worship the next president of the United States. You know, the Chinese and the Russians have never gotten along, even before they were communists. They're natural enemies because they share so much border. It's that big of a political deal. Okay, so I think you got that point. I've stressed it enough. Census is part of tax reform. That was introduced here. That you can check on the internet. It's not hard. And like I said, use my Ephesians 1 reparse doc because it's got a lot of links to Latin sources as well as translations. So they have to register to their own city. This is a Jewish practice. You considered yourself belonging to the city of your family's birth. If your family is Judah and you're from the house of David, you consider Bethlehem your birth. So this isn't such a surprising prophecy. They wouldn't even have to guess at it. Messiah is from the house of Judah. The house of Judah then becomes the house of David. The house of David is from Bethlehem. Tax or no tax. It just so happens that the tax has to be, the census is taken at the end of the year. Kind of like we do, you know, and a lot of countries do that. And then 4 months later they have the actual taxation, which in Judaism falls at Passover. That's when they paid their taxes. But it takes time to make sure you got a proper census so you know who to go to collect. And Rome had the same kind of problem, and it was Herod's people. It was Jews who were doing the tax collecting, i.e. Matthew, duh. Okay, so Saturnalia festival comes at the end of the year. That's why the Roman Catholics picked it, because they were, I don't know if they were trying to hide it or just incompetent, but it's Hanukkah. Hanukkah fell at those days at the end of the Roman year. They were almost coincidental, because the Roman year was a week of, the Saturnalia consisted of 2 separate holidays, half of which you were celebrating your ancestors, and the other half you were doing other things. Saturnalia and Kronos are similar names. One is Latin and the other one is Greek. And it was that was the title for the end of the year. And you were celebrating the fact that the year concluded and you were still alive. Paul makes a joke about that, in fact, in Galatians 4:4, using the word Kronos. Okay, because he's playing on the fact that this was Hanukkah. Okay? See, even the God of time delivers Messiah on time. That was the joke. Because this was when Messiah was supposed to arrive, per Haggai 2. They don't need to say that. And Matthew deliberately leaves it out to show you that the wrong questions are being asked and answered to the wrong people. And of course, the Gentiles aren't asking those questions because they don't care about the prophecy. What they care about is, are these guys a political threat? Prophecy doesn't interest them. The politics do. Okay? And since Herod was dying, this was particularly important. So Joseph, now we're looking at routine law. Again, Matthew's doing bang, 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 law stuff, but you have to read between the lines and know the background to see the wit, because the wit is all sotto voce here. All right? He's not making fun of the Magi for saying they saw a star that was an angel. He doesn't need to. And everybody reading that would have smiled and sort of giggled to themselves and would have been empathetic, because these people are actually believing in Christ. Okay, so all he has to do is say, hi, this was happening this time, and this was happening this time, because he's writing to a new audience that might not be so up to snuff. Okay? But he's also stressing the wryness of the time. It's Hanukkah. It's the end of the year. And that's when you had to register for the census, no matter what year it was. Birth or no birth. It just happens to be the time he's going to be born, which you knew from Haggai 2. Okay, so Joseph goes up from Galilee, Okay, Galilee, now this is where I have to get into some of the wit. Bethlehem, house of bread, okay, David's hometown. That's why Joseph has to leave. So Joseph is going from where? Galilee. How do I want to put this? Usually every major metropolis has a southern part of town. It's usually in the southeast that is derelict, where all the poor people go. You know, in Rio de Janeiro, they got the favelas, but I think that's southwest of Rio. I can't remember if it's southwest or southeast. But usually in the southeastern section of every town, that was not the nice part of town. Okay, definitely somewhere in the southern section. I don't know why southern sections are usually bad. Definitely like South Chicago, South Los Angeles. Those are all bad parts of town. You try to avoid them at night. All right? The idea being that they're poor people, they're uncultured, the crime rate is higher, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, that was the reputation of Galilee. This is where Ramah was. Remember? Down here? Highlands? Heights? Well, if you were a criminal, this is where you hid. It had that big lake, you know, the Sea of Galilee. They called it a sea. It was really a lake, really big lake. Okay? But it was very hilly. You could hide very easily. These are where the lower classes of society congregated. Okay? This is where they could find, you know, shelter from the police. It was not considered to be a nice part of Israel. Okay? And he's not only living in Galilee, which is the uncultured, you know, everybody spoke 2 or 3 languages, okay? They called you unilingual if you didn't speak the other languages well. Again, these are where the uneducated people were. These are where the riffraff were. These are where the people were kind of hiding from the law or from taxation went. Because they could jump over the border very easily, okay, if they needed to. And Nazareth was at the foot of, I forget what the mountain was. It was at the foot. Nazar means to guard. This is going to be really important for what Luke is going to say next. Eth is just the ending to make it into a noun. All right? And then, so they're going from a mountain town that's at the foothills of, okay, and this is like scrub. This is roughly like New Mexico. Okay? He's at a town, a little dusty town, made up of sheep herders. Again, sheep herders were considered kind of persona non grata, because sheep don't smell too good, okay? And the way you have to live as a sheep herder means that you're usually not very clean. It's really funny, because sheep are the sacrifice, the most important sacrifice for the temple, which we're going to get to also. So they're going south to Judea. I mean, it's part of it, but it's at the very southern end. The city of David, called Bethlehem, is southwest of Jerusalem, so it's about 6 days' journey south. And then he's filling in for those who don't know the law too well, because he was from the house and family of David, in order to register with Mary. See, that's how you had to do your taxes. That was Jewish law, not Roman. It was Herod collecting the taxes, not the Romans. Once the Jews collected the taxes, they gave it to the Romans, and that's why Quirinius had to have governorship rank to be eligible to take it back to his best boy, his best friend, and he also would have the troops nearby to garrison and protect the money. Okay? See how much sense this is beginning to make? It is a question of what year this is. Okay, Paul tells me, but my brain, every time I look at it, my eyes glaze over, so I'm not real sure. It's somewhere between 1 and 4 BC. I'm suggesting, and I'm beginning to think it's 2 BC, but I have to make sure I'm right on my math with Paul. Okay, so this all would have happened in any year, David or no David, okay? Tax or no tax as far as the Romans were concerned, birth or no birth. That was just the law. Head tax, that was the same law for the Jews as it was for the Romans. Now why is Luke centering on this story? Well, the obvious answer, it's not the whole answer. I'll never get the whole answer right. There's just always too much. He's filling in the backstory for this. See, when Matthew gives a thing short shrift, Luke provides detail. And then when Matthew provides detail, like here, Luke leaves it out. But he plays to it. So right now, he's filling in the detail on how it became Jerusalem. A lot of detail. There's a lot of interesting stuff here that he's going to cover. So now we know, okay, well, it was tax time. He would have had to go there anyway, whether Mary was pregnant or not. He would have had to go there anyway, whether it was Roman taxes or not. Because he's considered a resident of the place where his family was born. In order to what? Register for what? The census. Now, it does happen to be the Roman census. But it was done by Jews. Okay? It was not done by Romans. There was no Roman guard. You know, at least they have in some movies. There was no Roman guard sitting at a little wooden table saying, how many kids do you have? It was a Jewish official, as always, because they collected 2 taxes at the same time. All right? Witness, Matthew was a tax collector. Hello, everybody knows that. But I guess our brains just turn off when we think about this. We just suddenly assume that the Romans are sitting there. No, they're not. Okay, and you can easily prove that on the internet. All right. So he's going with Mary, who is engaged to him, and with child. She's pregnant. He's got to go. It's the end of the year. 9 months earlier, in Adar, as we're going to see below, she gets the notice. So this is now almost 25 Kislev, and he's got to go register because 25 Kislev coincides with the end of the Roman year. Hanukkah and the end of the Roman year are roughly coterminous. Okay? And the Saturnalia are roughly coterminous in those days, not today. Okay? While they were there, the days were completed for her to give birth. So you're looking at about, what, 2 weeks? Because it takes about 6 days, especially since, you know, she's pregnant. It takes about 6 days for them to get to Bethlehem from Nazareth, which is up in the highlands. Okay? They're up in the highlands. They're going south. And the travel routes will be slow and crowded because it's Hanukkah, as you're going to see when he plays on the lights with the angels. Okay? And so it takes them about 6 days to get there. It's going to take them 6 days to go back. And meanwhile, once she has birth, they have to stay longer. Because 8 days after her birth, her firstborn, okay, and this is the day of the birth, all right, and we're going to get into the shepherds now. But 8 days after this, she's got to take him to temple. So they can't go home right away. So maybe they were there for 6 days already. Maybe they were there just newly there that day. You know, the Bible movies usually pick them there that day. That's not necessarily true. I mean, the day that she gives birth, there's no room. Now, there's a guy who's trying to say that the no room at the inn, the stable, is actually really a house with the stable as an offshoot room. Okay? But this term is fatne, and it means a feed trough, wherever it is. Okay? Whether it's in a cave, or whether it's an offshoot room in somebody's house, like an add-on, an addition, like a 2-car garage attached. Because a lot of people had their animals housed that way. It could be. So that, in other words, there were other people there. But this is a fatne. In Greek, it means feed trough. There's nothing romantic about it. And I'm going to have to cover the cloth thing in the next video because that's going to take time. Ugh. I wish I didn't have to take so many detours. I'm sorry. But in order for you to get the way Matthew and Luke interweave, I sometimes have to stop and explain the Greek.